My name is Allison Carter. I'm 29 years old.
For most of my life, I learned how to disappear without leaving a trace. People assume invisibility is quiet, painless, something you simply accept and move on from. But that isn't true. Being unseen hurts in small, repeated ways. It's the pause after you speak, when no one responds. The way conversations move right past you, as if you never opened your mouth. The realization that even your absence wouldn't be noticed. In my family, there were always roles. They were assigned early, and no one ever questioned them. My older sister, Julia, was the star. Beautiful, loud, magnetic. Even as a child, she demanded attention like oxygen. Cameras loved her, mirrors adored her, and my parents, especially my mother, revolved around her orbit. Julia didn't just walk into rooms, she claimed them. My younger brother, Kyle, was the baby, the miracle, the one who could do no wrong. Every scraped knee earned sympathy, every tantrum was excused. He grew up wrapped in indulgence, protected from consequences the way glass ornaments are protected from falling. And then there was me. I didn't shine, I didn't charm, I didn't cry loudly enough to matter. I existed in the spaces between them. We lived in a 2-story house in Scottsdale, the kind of neighborhood where lawns were trimmed obsessively, and neighbors smiled while silently comparing lives. From the outside, we looked perfect. Inside, I learned early that love was conditional and unevenly distributed. Julia wanted to be famous before she even understood the word. She practiced poses in reflective surfaces, filmed fake tutorials with her phone balanced on stacks of books, and narrated her life as if an audience was always watching. My parents encouraged it. New clothes, photography equipment, ring lights, anything that fed her dream. Kyle, meanwhile, accumulated toys like trophies, drones, gaming consoles, sneakers he wore once before forgetting about them. My parents laughed at his messes, cleaned up after him, told guests how charming he was. And me? I liked numbers. I liked how math made sense when people didn't, how equations didn't care who your parents favored, how answers were earned, not gifted. I spent hours in my room reading about economics, investments, patterns hidden in plain sight. Numbers never talked over me. They never dismissed me. But to my parents, my interests were inconvenient. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" my mother would sigh, glancing at Julia's latest package from some beauty brand. My father was less subtle. "Books won't get you anywhere. You need personality." My room became my refuge. A small space with creaky floorboards, a narrow desk, and shelves bowed under the weight of used textbooks. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The only place in that house where I didn't feel like an afterthought. When I was 13, I started working weekends at a Safeway, bagging groceries and smiling at strangers for a few dollars an hour. I saved everything. Every bill, every coin. I hid the money in a tin box under my bed, dreaming of buying a laptop so I could teach myself more about finance. By 15, I had nearly $500. I was proud of that box. Then, one afternoon, Julia came home in tears, dramatic, breathless tears, about a beauty competition that required professional photos. She needed a better camera. Immediately. I came home from work to find my tin box empty. My parents didn't ask. They didn't warn me. They didn't apologize. "It's for your sister's future," my father said, already unpacking a brand new DSLR on the kitchen counter. Julia hugged the camera like a prize, already filming herself in the living room. I stood there, chest tight, watching my future disappear in someone else's hands. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I went back to my room, shut the door, and opened another book. That was the moment something hardened inside me. I stopped hoping they would see me, stopped competing for space that was never meant for me. If they weren't going to value me, I would. Quietly, relentlessly. I buried myself in my studies. Excel spreadsheets replaced teenage drama. While Julia chased the spotlight and Kyle collected toys, I built discipline, focus, patience. At family gatherings, neighbors asked about Julia's followers, about Kyle's hobbies. When they asked about me, my mother laughed it off. "Oh, she's just into numbers." Boring numbers. I learned to swallow the humiliation and convert it into fuel. My room became a fortress, not because it protected me, but because it reminded me of what I was building. Every notebook hidden under my bed, every plan scribbled late at night, every calculation that whispered a future no one else could imagine. They didn't know it yet. But one day, That room would be the first thing they tried to take from me. And when they did, everything would change. By the time I graduated high school, I had already learned the most important lesson of my life. If you wait for permission to become someone, you'll die waiting. College wasn't presented to me as a dream in my family. It was treated like an inconvenience. Julia was already gaining traction online. Free makeup, sponsored posts, brand emails pinging her phone at all hours. Kyle was still coasting, protected by my parents' belief that he'll figure it out later. I was expected to stay small, so I didn't ask. I applied for scholarships in silence, filling out applications late at night in my room while the rest of the house slept. I rewrote essays until dawn, polishing sentences that explained my love for finance, my hunger to understand systems that governed wealth and power. I wasn't chasing money for status. I was chasing freedom. When the acceptance letter from Arizona State University arrived, full ride, tuition covered, I read it 3 times just to be sure it was real. My parents' reaction was muted. "That's nice," my mom said, distracted, scrolling through Julia's latest post. My dad nodded. "Just don't get too ahead of yourself." They didn't celebrate. They didn't ask what I planned to do. They didn't even tell relatives. I packed my bags quietly. University was the first place where I wasn't invisible. I studied finance like my life depended on it, because in a way, it did. While other students partied, I worked weekends at a small financial advisory firm downtown, filing paperwork, running projections, listening, always listening. People talked when they thought you were just the intern. They talked about fear, about debt, about wanting a future that felt secure instead of fragile. I learned that money wasn't just numbers. It was emotion, anxiety, hope, wrapped into spreadsheets. By my second year, coworkers started asking me questions. How to budget, where to invest small amounts, how to plan for retirement when you felt behind. I helped them after hours, sketching simple strategies on scrap paper. It worked. They came back stunned, grateful. That's when I realized something my parents never had. I was good at this. After graduation, I didn't chase flashy firms or corporate titles. I saw a gap, real people needing real guidance. So I built something small, something quiet. I started my own consulting business, and I ran it from my childhood bedroom. The same room they mocked, the same desk they thought was useless. I built a website on a secondhand laptop, learned branding through free courses, met clients at coffee shops where they thought I was just another girl with a notebook. Within 3 years, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. Doctors, dentists, small business owners, retirees. Word spread. Results spoke louder than marketing. Revenue climbed into numbers my parents couldn't comprehend. And still, I lived at home. Same clothes, same car, same silence. They never asked how I afforded my student loans disappearing overnight. Never questioned why I was always calm about money. Never noticed the wire transfers, the growing accounts, the way I never needed help. At dinner, Julia bragged about follower counts. Kyle joked about his latest impulse purchase. My parents nodded along, proud. When I mentioned work, they waved it off. "You still doing that little finance thing?" my dad asked once, smirking. I smiled. Yeah. There were nights I doubted myself, nights where I stared at spreadsheets, wondering if success only mattered if someone acknowledged it. That's when Diane Rodriguez came into my life. We'd met in an economics class. She was sharp, sarcastic, and brutally honest. She showed up one evening, saw the exhaustion on my face, and said, "You know they're wrong, right?" I shrugged. "Doesn't matter." "It does," she said, "just not to them." She never pitied me, never tried to fix anything. She simply reminded me why I started. I kept going, signed bigger clients, built reserves, planned carefully. I wasn't saving to leave. I was saving for leverage. Because somewhere deep down, I knew the day would come when my family would try to take something from me again. And when they did, I'd be ready. The night before that fateful dinner, I sat at my desk, reviewing accounts, unaware it was the last peaceful moment I'd have in that room. I didn't know my mother had been planning. Didn't know my father was preparing an ultimatum. Didn't know Julia already saw my space as hers. All I knew was that I had built a life they couldn't see, and they were about to collide with it. The dinner table had always been a battlefield disguised as a place for family bonding. Every Saturday night, without fail, we gathered around the same heavy wooden table, scratched, uneven, soaked with years of spilled gravy and unspoken resentment.
My mother insisted on tradition. Same dishes, same seating, same invisible hierarchy.
My father sat at the head of the table, posture stiff, authority unquestioned. My mother took her place beside him, napkin folded just so, eyes always alert, watching, calculating. Julia lounged comfortably across from them, phone never far from her hand, her confidence filling the room like perfume. Kyle usually sat beside her, half listening, half distracted. And me? I took the same chair I always did, close enough to be present, far enough to be ignored. That night felt off. The air was thicker than usual, charged with something unnamed. Plates clinked, forks scraped porcelain, and small talk floated around me without landing. Julia laughed about a brand deal that hadn't even been finalized yet. My parents nodded eagerly, hanging onto every word. Kyle poked at his food, quieter than usual. I remember thinking, maybe this time we'll just eat. I was wrong. Halfway through the meal, my mother set her fork down deliberately. The sound was soft, but it cut through the noise like a signal. She smiled. Not warmly, not kindly. The kind of smile she used when she had already made a decision and expected obedience, not discussion. Sweetheart, she said, looking directly at me for once, your father and I have been talking. My stomach tightened. We've decided, she continued, that your sister needs more space. Julia didn't look up from her phone. She didn't have to. She already knew. My mother gestured vaguely toward the hallway. Your room would be perfect for her beauty studio. It's time you let it go. The words didn't register at first. My room. The place where I studied, where I built my business, where I hid when the rest of the house swallowed me whole. I stared at her, fork suspended in midair. What? Before I could say anything else, my father slammed his hand down on the table. The dishes rattled. This isn't a debate, he barked. You either agree or you get out. Silence. The kind that presses against your ears until you can hear your own heartbeat. I felt every pair of eyes on me. My mother's expectant gaze, my father's glare, Julia's slow, satisfied smirk as she finally looked up from her phone. Kyle froze, fork halfway to his mouth, eyes darting between us. Julia leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. Come on, she said lightly. It's not like you need the space. What do you even do in there, shuffle papers? She laughed. My chest burned. That room wasn't just four walls. It was the only thing in that house that had ever belonged to me. Every sacrifice, every late night, every quiet victory lived there. And they wanted it, just like that. I could have exploded. I could have told them about the money they stole from me, about the years they dismissed me, about the business they mocked that was worth more than everything they owned. I could have made them choke on the truth. Instead, I smiled, slowly, calmly, intentionally. The smile unsettled them. My mother's brows knit together, my father's jaw tightened. Julia's smirk faltered, just for a fraction of a second. Kyle looked at me like he was seeing a stranger. Let's finish dinner, I said, my voice steady. Too steady. My mother blinked. Allison! I repeated gently, pushing my plate away. Let's finish dinner. My father's face flushed red. He opened his mouth, ready to roar again, but my mother touched his arm. She tried a different tactic. It's for the family, she coaxed. Your sister's career is taking off. She needs support. Julia tossed her hair. And it's not like you're doing anything important. I met her eyes, and I held them. They didn't know what I was thinking. They couldn't imagine it. They saw the same quiet daughter they had always overlooked. But something had shifted. I wasn't asking for permission anymore. I excused myself, stood up, and walked back to my room, closing the door behind me. I didn't cry. I opened my laptop. I checked my accounts. The numbers stared back at me, calm, reassuring. Years of discipline, of silence, of preparation. That night, I slept with a decision made. The next morning, I made a phone call. Sharon, I said when the line picked up, I want the house across the street. She paused. Are you sure? Yes, I said. Let's close. By Friday, the wire was sent. By Sunday, I held the deed. They thought they had pushed me out. They had no idea I was about to move closer. Much closer. The house didn't look extraordinary from the outside. 2 stories, neutral paint, a trimmed lawn that smelled faintly of fresh-cut grass. The kind of place families passed without a second glance. But to me, it was everything. It was leverage. I stood on the sidewalk across from my parents' house, keys heavy in my palm, staring at the front door like it was a line I was about to cross. For years, I'd imagined leaving. driving away, starting fresh somewhere they couldn't reach me. I never imagined staying close. Close enough to be undeniable. The closing had been fast, shockingly fast. Cash has a way of cutting through hesitation. Sharon had been professional, efficient, almost amused by how calm I was signing paperwork that represented more money than my parents had ever held at once. "You sure you want it this close?" she'd asked casually. I smiled. "That's the point." I didn't move in right away. Instead, I waited. Sunday morning came with the familiar ritual, family coffee. My mother insisted on it, even when no one enjoyed it. She liked the illusion of unity, of control. I walked into their house with the deed folded neatly in my bag, my expression neutral. My mother greeted me with the same tight smile she'd worn all week. "Have you thought about our discussion?" she asked, pouring coffee she already knew I wouldn't drink. My father grunted from his chair. "We need an answer." Julia was sprawled on the couch, phone in hand, scrolling like nothing in the world concerned her. Kyle sat at the table, quieter than usual, eyes flicking toward me and then away. I sat down. "I've made my decision," I said calmly. They leaned in. "I'm moving out," I continued, "into the house across the street." Silence. Then, "What?" my father barked. My mother laughed nervously. "Across the street? What does that even mean?" Julia's phone slipped from her hand and hit the floor with a dull thud. Kyle leaned forward. "Wait, what?" I reached into my bag and placed the deed on the table. "I bought it," I said, "paid in full." My mother stared at the paper like it might explode. My father's coffee mug froze halfway to his mouth. "That's not funny." "It's not a joke," I replied evenly. Julia scoffed, scrambling to regain control. "With what money?" I looked at her. "Mine." The room felt like it was shrinking. "I've been running a personal finance consulting business for years," I continued. "It's not a job, it's a company, and it's worth millions." My father shot to his feet. "That's impossible. You've been living here." "Because I chose to," I interrupted softly. My mother's voice trembled. How long?" "All this time." Right on cue, my phone buzzed. Sharon's name lit up the screen. I put her on speaker. "Congratulations again, Allison," she said brightly. "The house is officially yours, one of the smoothest cash deals I've ever handled." The words landed like a bomb. My mother sank into her chair. My father's face flushed red, anger battling something dangerously close to fear. Julia stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. "You're lying," she muttered, but her voice shook. Kyle said nothing. He just watched me, really watched me, for the first time in his life. "I'm moving this week," I said, standing. "I'm not taking my room. You can do whatever you want with it." My mother jumped up. "Wait, no, we didn't mean it like that. We can talk." My father nodded quickly. "Yeah, you don't have to leave. We're family." Julia recovered fast. Too fast. "So, how much do you actually make?" she asked, eyes gleaming. "Because maybe we could—" "No," I said simply. That word cut deeper than shouting ever could. "This isn't about money," I continued. "It's about respect, and I'm done waiting for it." Kyle finally spoke. "You're really leaving?" I met his eyes. "I already have." I walked out without another word. Moving day was quiet. I packed my books, my desk, my notebooks filled with years of work. No one offered to help. No one stopped me. Julia avoided me entirely. My parents watched from the doorway like they were witnessing something irreversible. From my new front porch, I looked back at their house, and for the first time, I felt free. The aftermath came quickly. Julia's world began to crack almost immediately. Her influencer lifestyle had been built on illusion, free products, borrowed money, reckless confidence. But behind the scenes, she'd been spiraling. Online shopping, risky crypto trades, chasing fast money the way she chased validation. It caught up with her. Screenshots leaked. Debts surfaced. Sponsors vanished overnight. Her follower count plummeted. My parents panicked. To save her, they sold their house. The house I'd grown up in. The house they'd threatened to throw me out of. It wasn't enough. They moved into a cramped apartment in Glendale, furniture barely fitting, pride shattered. Kyle came to see me one evening, standing awkwardly on my porch. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I didn't see it before." I didn't forgive him, not yet. But I listened. From across the street, every morning, I sipped my coffee and waved. A small gesture. A permanent reminder. Watching a collapse from a distance changes the way it feels. When you're standing inside the wreckage, everything is loud. Shattering glass, raised voices, panic. But from across the street, from a place of safety and clarity, the destruction unfolds slowly, quietly, almost politely. That's how my family unraveled. Julia was the first crack. For years, her life had been fueled by attention and easy money, sponsorships that arrived without effort, validation that poured in with every filtered photo. She never learned restraint, or accountability, or what it meant to earn something that couldn't be taken away. When her influencer income began to stall, she panicked. She turned to online shopping to soothe the anxiety, then to crypto trading apps promising overnight wins. At first, she bragged about it. Screenshots of small gains, buzzwords she didn't understand. She called it investing, but it was gambling, impulsive, emotional, reckless. Losses piled up. She hid it at first. Credit cards maxed out, personal loans, then private lenders. Every problem met with denial, every warning dismissed. My parents enabled it the way they always had, blindly, desperately. Then the scandal broke. A rival influencer released screenshots, receipts, evidence of Julia's losses, her debts, her desperate attempts to borrow money from fans under fake pretenses. The internet turned fast. Sponsors dropped her within hours. Followers vanished in waves. I watched it all from my living room. Julia stopped posting, stopped leaving the apartment, stopped pretending she was okay. Her confidence drained out of her like air from a punctured balloon. My parents scrambled. They made calls, pleaded, tried to negotiate with creditors who no longer cared about reputation or excuses. To save Julia, they did what they had always done. They sacrificed everything else. They sold their house, the same house they told me I could leave if I didn't comply. It went fast, but not for much. Desperation doesn't negotiate well. After paying off a fraction of Julia's debts, they were left with barely enough to rent a small apartment in Glendale. No yard, no extra rooms, no illusion of success. I drove past the empty house once. The sold sign still stood in the yard. I didn't feel satisfaction. Just finality. Kyle changed next. He showed up at my door one evening, shoulders slumped, the bravado gone. He didn't bring excuses, just silence and something like shame. I didn't realize how bad it was, he admitted. What they did to you. What we did. I didn't interrupt him. He talked about the apartment, about Julia crying behind closed doors, about our parents fighting in whispers they thought he couldn't hear, about the weight of realizing he'd been protected at someone else's expense. I don't want to be like that, he said quietly. I want to do something real. He enrolled in community college, computer science, took a part-time job at Geek Squad, texted me updates, not bragging, not asking for praise, just sharing progress. I didn't rush forgiveness, but I wired his tuition when he passed his first semester. That was my line. Effort first, help second. My parents tried last. Their calls started cautiously, casual check-ins, forced laughter, talk of family unity and misunderstandings. I answered once. My mother cried, apologized vaguely, spoke more about regret than responsibility. My father said he was proud of me now. I listened. And then I said, I'm not cutting you off, but I'm not stepping back in. They wanted access to my success, to my stability, to the version of me they could suddenly respect. I didn't owe them that. Julia took a job at Target. No filters, no applause, just fluorescent lights and a name tag she hated wearing. I saw her once, sitting on the steps of the apartment building, phone dark in her hands. She didn't look up when I passed. Life settled into a new rhythm. My house filled with people who knew my worth without needing proof. Clients, friends. Diane helped me throw a housewarming party. Not emotional support this time, just logistics and laughter. To Allison, she toasted, who built this without permission? I stood there, glass in hand, listening to conversations that didn't orbit around ego or favoritism. For the first time, my home felt full. Not loud. Full. From my porch, I still waved at the old house, even after they moved. A habit, a reminder. Not of revenge, but of resolution. The strange thing about peace is that it doesn't announce itself. There's no dramatic moment where the past finally lets go, no clear line between survival and stability. It arrives quietly, in ordinary routines, in mornings that no longer feel heavy. For me, peace came in small rituals. Coffee on my front porch, the sun rising over a street that once held all my resentment and now held none of my power. I still waved at the old house out of habit, even after a new family moved in. They waved back sometimes, confused but polite. I smiled. My parents' calls slowed, then stopped. At first, I thought it would hurt more than it did. I had spent so many years craving acknowledgement that I assumed silence would feel like punishment. But it didn't. It felt like space. Space to breathe. Space to decide who I wanted in my life without guilt attached. Kyle stayed. He didn't ask for money again. He didn't show up with excuses. He sent me screenshots of past exams, messages about late-night study sessions, questions about internships. He listened when I spoke. He didn't minimize my experiences or rewrite our childhood. That mattered. I helped when it felt earned. Guidance, connections, occasional financial support when it aligned with effort, not entitlement. Julia never reached out. Sometimes I saw her on social media, tagged in someone else's photo, always in the background now. No filters, no captions, just existing. I didn't feel triumph. I felt distance. My parents tried once more, months later. A message about holidays, about how time changes people. I read it. Then I archived it. Not out of anger, out of clarity. My life was full. My business expanded steadily. I hired staff, took fewer clients personally. I mentored young women who reminded me of myself. Quiet, underestimated, capable. I told them what no one told me early enough. You don't need permission to build something meaningful. Diane remained my constant. She teased me about becoming too corporate, helped me plan dinners, reminded me to rest. She never tried to define my success for me. One evening, as we sat in my living room surrounded by laughter and half-finished plates, she raised her glass again. To choosing yourself, she said. I thought about my childhood room, the one they tried to take, how small it had been, how powerful it became. They thought removing me would erase me. Instead, it revealed me. I didn't win by watching them lose. I won by refusing to stay invisible. If you've ever been overlooked, if you've ever been treated like background noise in your own family, this is what I want you to know. Your worth isn't measured by who notices you. It's measured by what you build when no one is watching. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't leaving. It's standing close enough to be undeniable and walking away anyway.